So far in the Gospel of Luke, we've seen the birth of John the Baptist, we've seen the birth of Jesus, then we saw Jesus at the age of 12, and then we jump forward in chapter 3 of Luke to when John the Baptist is beginning his ministry, and John the Baptist is preaching in the wilderness, baptizing people. Well, then, picking up today in Luke chapter 3 and verse 21, we really see, if you will, when Jesus is going to begin his ministry. And we know that one thing that began, or at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, is his own baptism. That we had read in Luke chapter 3 in the first half of the chapter, that all the people were coming to John the Baptist to be baptized. Well, then, verse 21, when all the people were baptized, it came to pass that Jesus also was baptized. And while he prayed, the heaven was opened, and the Holy Spirit descended in bodily form like a dove upon him. And a voice came from heaven which said, "You are my beloved Son, in you I am well pleased." And so here we have Jesus himself coming out to the baptism of John, and Jesus then praying. And as he's praying, after Jesus has been baptized and he's praying, Luke says that the heavens, the sky opens up, and the Holy Spirit comes down in bodily form like a dove upon Jesus. And then this voice came from heaven, that of course of God the Father, and says to Jesus and of Jesus, "You are my beloved Son, in you I am well pleased." So right there, we have a lot going on. We have the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We have the sign of the Holy Spirit, as we read in the other gospel accounts, that it was a sign, or John tells us it was a sign to John to know that Jesus is the Christ, the Messiah. We also see God speaking from heaven, that Jesus is his Son, and that God is well pleased in him. It's really a lot going on there. The baptism of Jesus was a very big deal. Jesus not having any sins to be forgiven, but as he said in the other gospel accounts of his baptism, that Jesus was there to fulfill all righteousness. Jesus was there to obey the will of God like everybody else. And so he did. And we see this at this time, the Holy Spirit comes upon Jesus, and then the Holy Spirit will be with Jesus throughout his ministry, Jesus being able to perform miracles through the Spirit of God. And then, really, verses 23 through 38, we have a genealogy that Luke gives, and I am not going to read all of these names. I would probably mess up on some of them. But what happens is, notice in verse 23, we're told by Luke that Jesus himself began his ministry at about 30 years of age. So Jesus was about 30 years old when this was happening, when he was beginning his ministry. So, that much time has passed from when he was 12, about 18 years from the last account back in chapter 2. We're not told a lot about the early life of Jesus. We're told about his birth. We're told about what happened when he was 12. And then we jump to 30, which, of course, this would make John the Baptist about 30 as well, as John the Baptist was born shortly before Jesus. And so we have the genealogy, though. Notice what Luke does in this genealogy is he goes from Jesus's earthly father of Joseph all the way back to Abraham, all the way back to Adam. And so this genealogy of Jesus being traced through the lineage of Abraham, of course the lineage of David, then of Abraham, then to Adam. And so we know exactly who Jesus is a descendant of the tribe of Judah, and we can trace that in his genealogy. But this is when Jesus is beginning his ministry. And next time we'll look at what happened shortly after his baptism, right after his baptism, as it's put then in the other gospel accounts. But we'll save that for next time. And it is something to think about every time I read this, that Jesus was about 30 years. I mean, right now I'm 35. So technically, I'm now older than what Jesus was when he began his ministry. And think of Jesus at a young age, like 30, and then would be on earth for a few more years, preaching and performing miracles, and then dying and being resurrected. It is really something to think about. So we'll get more into this next time, but until then, God bless.